Hi, my name is Nazanin Andalibi, and I am sharing work that I did together with my colleague Patricia Garcia, this Globe Information at the University of Michigan. As a heads up, this talk includes content about pregnancy loss. Emotional validation describes when one believes that their activities, emotions, beliefs, or other reactions are relevant and meaningful given the circumstances. We all need emotional validation. When people experience distressing and stigmatizing life events, their state of emotional validation, and therefore their perceived sense of normalcy, is often disrupted. Online spaces offer opportunities for coping, managing, and making sense of distress and stigma. In this study, we focus on pregnancy loss as the context of inquiry and as an important example of a disruptive life experience that is often associated with stigma. We investigate how individuals managing pregnancy loss use online spaces to achieve and maintain emotional validation, and how these validation processes are also disrupted in online spaces. Drawing on interviews conducted with women in the US who had experienced the pregnancy loss, we identified two forms of validation processes that result in emotional validation: informational and experiential. In our paper, we present findings across these four themes. Overall, participants sought informational validation by actively seeking multiple information sources, converging information across sources, and aligning their personal experiences of loss with their unified understanding of the information while striving for a sense of perceived normalcy. They sought experiential validation by seeking interpersonal interactions and others' stories of loss that made them feel seen, understood, and accepted. We do not refer to normalcy as a universal concept or even as an affective experience with shared meaning for everyone. We refer to normalcy as a desired quality among participants and recognize the desire to achieve a sense of perceived normalcy as an emotional need. In this talk, I will largely focus on cases where validation processes were disrupted, which I've highlighted here in orange. We identified disruptions to finding and maintaining emotional validation to be related to information, interpersonal interactions, designs, and algorithms. And in turn, these distinct factors impeded achieving a sense of perceived normalcy and sense-making. In this talk, I'll provide examples of cases where we observed disruption of emotional validation through related to information, designs, and algorithms. Sometimes encountering certain information was disruptive. For instance, seeing evidence-based research that challenged personal understandings of pregnancy loss was disruptive. For example, this participant said, "You want to hear yes, it's normal." Then you hear, "It's not normal." Participants tended to want to avoid these types of information encounters, or at least have some sort of control over the type of information that they encountered. On how designs were disruptive, this participant said, "There's no way to tell your app," and in this case, these are pregnancy tracking apps, "I had a miscarriage. Please stop sending me these updates, like this week your baby is the size of a banana or whatever. There's no way to stop those." This participant continued to say, "I remember with the Avia app, I just had to delete it. I was like, this thing is making me really mad. And then when I reinstalled it, because I got pregnant again, I was like, I wonder if all my old information is in there. And the app thinks I had a 3-month-old. They're like, whatever name is I put in there, a period or something. And it was like, so-and-so should be starting to roll over now or whatever." I'm like, no. So as we can imagine, these are really emotionally challenging experiences that participants experienced, and they leading to real harm experienced by participants. I've described this phenomena of pregnancy apps not accounting for loss in any meaningful way, or sometimes in harmful ways, through a previous study where I analyzed features of pregnancy apps with a particular lens to see how they account for experiences of loss. And I described this phenomena as symbolic annihilation through design. Here we find support for this phenomena through users' perspectives. On harmful algorithmic encounters, participant 7 elaborated on how, in spite of engaging in privacy-preserving behavior, she still got ads that presumed that she was still pregnant, and found those experiences to be very harmful and emotionally distressing. She said, I was getting ads for maternity clothes. I was just like, oh, please stop. And I tried. I was really careful whenever I search for any pregnancy-related information. I do it in incognito mode. I really tried very hard to not let that stuff infiltrate. We introduced through this investigation the novel concept of algorithmic symbolic annihilation that describes how algorithms perpetuate normative and stereotypical narratives about phenomena, but what they account for, like a pregnancy that is full-term and healthy, has power, and what they do not account for, like a pregnancy loss, does not, leading to emotional and representational harms. We found that algorithmic encounters, like experiences with ads that assumed that one was pregnant or still pregnant or had experienced a healthy pregnancy, were emotionally harmful and invalidating for people who experienced losses. Similar to how the very design of pregnancy apps, as I've seen in prior work, fails to account for loss and renders these losses subject to symbolic annihilation through design, algorithmic encounters also assumed rosy linear pregnancy outcomes. We suggest that algorithmic symbolic annihilation is a useful lens to interrogate other harmful algorithmic encounters that reinforce normative perceptions of other phenomena as well. We suggest designing for information avoidance and designing to combat both design and algorithmic symbolic annihilation. Emotional validation involved avoiding emotional invalidation through informational avoidance sometimes. So we argue that rather than privileging greater access to any and all information as a generic principle, we should advocate for designing systems with self-protective features that afford information avoidance. We also suggest designing for representational belonging to combat design and algorithmic-based symbolic annihilation. Representational belonging refers to the effective responses that community members have to seeing their communities represented with complexity and nuance. It's a concept that has been introduced in the feminist media literature that we draw from, similar to the concept of symbolic annihilation. We argue that designing against symbolic annihilation is a key way forward to accounting for the needs, existence, and experiences of those in the margins of pregnancy and reproductive health narratives, such as those who experience pregnancy losses. So overall in this work, we contribute an in-depth characterization of validation and disruption processes after pregnancy loss as mediated online. We introduce the concept of algorithmic symbolic annihilation and find support for the concept of symbolic annihilation through design. We suggest designing for representational belonging to combat both design and algorithmic symbolic annihilation, as well as designing for information avoidance. We advocate that advertising and content delivery systems should be designed with more sensitivity to the complexity of people's experiences and not cause more harm than individuals may already be encountering. This does not mean, however, that we should instead be exploiting losses and advertise other products. We advocate that mobile apps used by pregnant individuals in relation to pregnancy should explicitly account for loss, as not doing so will further stigmatize and invalidate the experience and hinder opportunities for healing.